Hello, welcome back to the Notebook Podcast, where we talk about what others don't. I'm your host, Morgan Daley, and today's episode is 25 things I've learned in the past 25 years. I turned 25 on February 28th, and it was a really impactful birthday for me. I feel like you never really know which birthdays are going to hit you, that you are in a different age, but 25 was a big one for me. And I think that even though there was a lot of anxiety about the state of the world and of my past and how things are going to unfold in the next several years, I also found such a security settling into the woman I've become and the woman I always dreamed of being and worked towards. And I felt, even though I always have aspirations that I make aligned action towards, I am very content in who I am and how I'm actually spending my lifetime and life source energy on the journey to becoming. And I'm really grateful for this time in my life. So this list has so many, honestly, all of them are so serious and important to me. Some are a little bit more silly than others. Some have some random quotes. Some I go into more depth, and some I just keep it like very short and sweet. But they're all really like profound things that I've come to understand in my life, in my quarter century, as I've been saying. So let's dive in. Okay, number one is we should all give ourselves the best chance we have at being happy. And this is a quote I stumbled across not too long ago, and I think it's something that I've really been leading by in mindset in the last couple of years. I get into more specifics of perspective and energy and our emotional guidance system at other points, but I think that zooming back out, again, to your lifetime, your life source energy, to connections, to your feelings, to the simple pleasures and what truly brings value to your life, what you identify with, what you resonate with. I think really allowing yourself that space to be introspective enough and to know yourself well enough to know what's actually worth your time and attention, because these are such extremely valuable but depleting assets that we all have. Second, confidence is quiet. I recently also came across the quote, better to be cringe in someone else's mind than to be caged in your own. And I think that I've noticed this going back to school a little bit older and seeing so many young people um, that I wrote the note that I exist relatively indifferent to perception, which I think is it took me a very long time to get here. And I think it's one of those blessings in disguise from trauma. Like, I am somebody who profoundly believes that everything happens for a reason, and I know that that can be a really hard concept to grasp when there's so much deep tragedy in the world and you ask yourself why people bring harm or start wars, or there's so many ripple effects to the butterfly effect that we can't even begin to grasp the energetic impact of every little action and its implications. And also, I'm a great believer that like contrast that allows us to feel good or bad and understand a circumstance better, it it isn't about the binary feelings that we give it in our limited third dimensional perspective in the grander scheme of things. That I tend to go about things with a more non-dualistic approach where like you can find that everything exists not just on a spectrum but like an infinite spectrum and an infinite amount of directions, and you find what resonates with you and your identity and your self-expression in the life that you want to live. But to chastise or isolate or bring harm to any other polarity would also to bring harm to yourself, because we are all one and we are all existing on that same spectrum. So with that, I know with my, limited human perspective, no matter how introspective or wise or hyper fixated I can be on in consciousness and psychology and philosophy and all of these things, I won't begin to scratch the surface of all of the ways that all of the things that I have experienced and partaken in could impact me and others. But I have been able to witness how, very difficult things to have experienced that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy has also so uniquely prepared me for certain experiences I know that I'm meant to have, or things that I know I'm meant to become. And in that, it allows me to have a little bit more faith in knowing who I am, what I desire, what my morals are, and setting myself in a direction and taking aligned action, and all of the other things that come up and I happen to endure or experience are transforming me into that version of me that I asked to become, to be actually receptive to the life that I desire. To give a little bit more of a specific example in this, like I grew up needing to have to allow paradoxical truths to simultaneously be true, and that really fed into my curiosity of consciousness and psychology and physics and overlapping disciplines, and understanding how and why the universe works. And it allowed me to think very creatively about what's possible. And another example would be I grew up also very much in isolation, with a lot of like gaslighting and perception on my identity being skewed. And with that came a lot of a fear of that. And so I would socially isolate. I was also extremely neurodivergent, and neurotypical social dynamics confused me. And that became even more socially isolating. And then to be happy or optimistic or to look a certain way became, well, how can she be so content and not want to be friends with me? And that became very much like a canvas to perpetuate this sort of bullying. And now I understand the role that I played in that. And the further isolating myself, even if I did not understand exactly what I was doing. And that doesn't make an excuse for anybody's behavior. It doesn't make it mean that I deserve it or anything. But it all also so uniquely prepared me to be criticized on a larger scale, which is something that you take on when you are really passionate about spending your lifetime creating art or making resources and education accessible. That comes with a vulnerability to a bigger audience than, a person typically has. So to bring this back to point number 2, that confidence is quiet and existing relatively indifferent to perception, it's important to constantly look inward and to take accountability on whether you're coming from an educated place, whether you're coming from a healed place, whether you're coming from good intention, and all of these things. But when it comes to authenticity and self-expression and identity, those are things that you need to discover and know for yourself. And speaking of life experience, I had just spent, nearly 2 decades just attempting to contort into the shape of something lovable. And that self-sacrifice, that constantly putting my own identity and even autonomy on the chopping block for so long, no amount of superficial acceptance or praise was validating or fulfilling, because none of it was about me. It was about what I was providing in a very transactional relationship. So I don't know, I think that the true deep confidence comes from knowing thyself and acting like it, and being at peace with however other people will respond to that. Like I said, that there are going to be people on all different parts of that spectrum, and some people are going to resonate with you and some people aren't. So as long as you are coming from good intention, with no harm, and well educated, it doesn't really matter what you do. Okay, number 3, on a very similar note of perception, very few people will perceive you past what you look like. And if they do, it's very often through the lens of what you could do for them. And that's just, unfortunately, kind of the state of the world that we're in. Not to be in a pessimistic mindset, because I'm going to get into the fact that I really do believe that the reality we experience is very much based on our perception. And I personally don't engage with relationships that have that. And so I have countless people who are oceans of depth in my life, and I don't really encounter this, but like, I'm also aware from the life that I've experienced prior that, like, statistically speaking, this is very true for a lot of people. But especially if you are polarizing in appearance or in energy. Also, people will choose to remember whatever version of you that they had some degree of control over, no matter how much you've healed or changed. Or they will entirely falsify a narrative if it supports the limiting beliefs that keep them safe in the confines of their mental reality. So some people will never know you, no matter how much you show them who you are. And that's the some people can only meet you as deep as they've met themselves vibe, you know? It is what it is. Going off that a little further for point number 4, very simple and sweet. My peace is worth any cost. I mean, I don't really know how to, detail that any further. I don't know, after the life that I've led, there is no tangible asset or relationship to me that is providing more of something that I can't already provide for myself that's worth any self-sacrifice or distress or emotional turmoil. 5, I literally held up a 5. I'm like, I'm not filming a video right now, guys. Oh my God, I'm so used to filming videos. Anyway, you're preventing yourself from obtaining your desires by believing that they require hard work and sacrifice to be worthy of. And this was something really hard for me to admit to myself. And I actually just said to a friend this last term, but to stop trying is to, like, quote unquote, trying, like doing the most, like taking action that's not aligned action, like busy work, or just, again, contorting yourself into the shape of something that's supposedly desirable. But to stop doing that is to admit that you actually deserve it exactly as you are. 6, this is actually a quote that my meditation app, Headspace, if you wanted to know, not sponsored, said in one of the sessions, and then put as like the quote at the end of the session. But to live wisely is to keep death by our side, appreciating each precious moment and finding peace with the impermanent nature of life. This one has always really stood out to me. I do plan on creating an episode called Death and How to Live. But I think that, especially in the US, we are hidden from our own mortality, because I think when we are less conscious of the fact that it is a finite resource and it's really all we have in this lifetime, that and our energy and this is our time, that we become more willing to sacrifice for this like elusive bigger picture. And I mean, we can get into a whole side tangent about like our generation being criticized for not wanting to work, when to get most humans to take action on things, you need to incentivize them. Like you think of like voting, like if people's issues are not being represented, they're not going to show up to represent anybody else. And the same thing with work. Like people used to be incentivized by the fact that they could go on trips or afford nice things or have a home or a family someday. And these are not things that are necessarily attainable in the US any longer. So that greatly influences people's willingness to even participate in the whole machine of it all. But yeah, circling back to the life that I've led thus far, I think that my own mortality has always been, the kind of like cornerstone of my priorities and my perspective. And I think it is like I used to get a lot of comments that I was very mature for my age. Like my mindset was very quote unquote adult. Like my head was on straight, my perspective was yada yada yada. And I think it was this identifying my own mortality that even a lot of the adults that I was talking to didn't to this depth. But I think it was just because I realized how much of my life I was wishing away when I didn't have as much free will or autonomy. I say as much, I'm being nice. And I realized that was time that I would never get back. And there were also experiences that I would never have. So much of like a traditional like childhood that would just not be true for this life, this identity, this person that I am right now. And I think that just made me so wholly conscious of, again, how I choose to spend my time and energy and the things that I entertain. 7. This is, if you take away anything, please let it be this point. This is the most important point. Time is not linear. Our life is governed by our quantum entanglements. Our reality is a projection of what we believe, not what we hope for, and knowing is subjective. Everything is indeed energy that we have autonomy to influence. It is our greatest currency, and our perception is absolutely everything. To build upon that, the universe absolutely has a sense of humor if you are paying attention. If you want a little bit more of like a sciencey explanation of this, I would recommend my very first episode, which is my preliminary research in the superconscious state. It's definitely something I want to spend my life and career. I mean, I say career, I would really prefer if my career could be more in content and performance and media and music. And doing this research and studying of science on my own accord. But it is something I would spend my life doing, even if it was my primary career. But yes, I definitely love this, and this is my my neurodivergent hyperfixation. But yeah, I think just understanding exactly how time and energy is really functioning for us, and I get into this a little bit more in a later point, but how our brains are algorithmic. Even if you are neurodivergent and your brain operates fundamentally different, it also is like a great superpower in a lot of ways, because of it's the way that it's habitual or creative or denies stagnancy, and it allows for such transformation and creative perspective and yada yada yada. So I definitely love being neurodivergent, but yeah, if the more cognizant you are of how exactly life and energy transactions are operating, the more autonomy you can have over your life. And I'm really passionate about putting that power back into each individual's hands. Number 8, you cannot force trauma out of the body. This was something that I think was really hard on my healing journey, because I mean, healing is something that never ends, but there was a huge chapter of my life where it was like my identity and really everything that I was doing and everything else I was passionate about or identified with really took a back burner for like over a decade. And in that time, I did about like 3 decades of work, and I would take home psychology texts and really study those things. But one thing that I learned was I would logically understand brain functioning or emotional concepts a lot longer before, or a lot sooner before my body was actually ready to start dissolving some of that muscle armor or metabolizing some of that pain or actually allowing myself to be vulnerable. There was, 7 years that I had a headache. There were 2 decades where I was just not present in my body. And to this day, even though I've danced every single day of my life, and a huge part of that is not just my love of performing, but that transmutation of energy, it wasn't until these last couple of years that I was even like present in my body and like felt sensations or good or bad. But when it comes to actually metabolizing that and transmuting that, you have to show up every day. You push your boundaries and you prove to your mind and yourself that you are okay, that you can trust yourself, that space will be made, that it is okay to show up or be vulnerable. Furthermore, this also impacts your self-worth when your mind believes that you deserve people showing up for you because you have had the discipline to show up for yourself. 9, you are so much more capable and qualified than you believe yourself to be. And literally just try for things. Everything that I've done was because I've had the gall to bet on myself. I saw several years ago this funny thing online that was like, maneuver the world with the confidence of like a white cis man. And honestly, yeah, like I had gotten every job that I had gone for by the charisma that I showed in my interview, or I just like I took chances. I kind of chaotically go about things with the ideology that like if you don't ask, the answer is always no, and to shoot your shot because you never know what's possible for you. And in that creative thinking, like sometimes you're like, that's a cool gym I want to train at, that's a cool person I want to work with. That's like, I've just like emailed people. I'm like, what can I learn from you? What opportunities do you have? And sometimes it's nothing, and that's totally okay, but I wouldn't have known if I didn't try. Number 10, family, friend, and partner are titles that are earned through action. People are telling you exactly who they are and how they perceive the role you play in their life, so believe them. Love is not loud, it is consistent. I also wrote down a quote of my own that I wrote quite some time ago that I said, I want a family and a home, not a house and relatives. And then I wrote down a quote that I had seen online, you kissed the knife before you threw it at me. In the last year, I have seen so much compassion and empathy through my chosen family, but also their extended family. And don't get me wrong, I think with with the society we formed and this breaking point that we find ourselves at collectively, I think that there's generational trauma in even some of the healthiest homes. But still, some of my friends who have gone through some real things with their families have still shown up for me in a way that people I know haven't even been able to do. And I think about, as an adult woman, again, having the call to bet on myself and the courage to actually try, especially, again, considering the US and the whole incentives thing, and that it's hard to be a person here. The way that my friends' families have taken me in for months without even knowing me, on breaks when I had nowhere else to go, or have made home cooked meals with me, or have sat as a family and ate with me, or have picked me up or driven me somewhere, or made sure I had a job when I was staying with them, or a warm bed, or have stored my things so that they weren't left in a place that I wasn't comfortable with my possessions being left at. You know, they're all choices that, people that I have been presented with through birth and proximity did not make that choice or have that compassion towards me in the same way that these people who, before this were strangers. And to me, that's why these titles are earned through action and respect. And who do you think now has my respect that I value, that are actually going to have a seat at the table in these milestones of my life, and have my appreciation and gratitude? For 11, going off that a little bit, love will always be a gamble. Anyone can lie. You may never know everything someone is thinking or what their intentions may be. But again, having that foundation in knowing yourself and trusting yourself, and that you're going to keep yourself safe, and knowing that you have some sense of security and autonomy and identity outside of your connections. It's also like, what an unfulfilling life would it be to not have the courage to allow something miraculous to even bloom for you, just out of fear. It's a gamble, it's a risk worth taking, but people can be so compassionate and so kind and so vulnerable and transparent, and there comes a point where you will always still have to take that risk to trust them, to open up to them, and also not place your inherent self-worth or identity on the outcome of their perception and their subsequent choice and actions. 12, one thing I've learned about myself is I'm a lot more neurodivergent than I thought I was. I've brought it up a lot in the last year in pretty much everything I've produced because it impacts me so greatly. And I remember I've had to part ways with my therapist several times through like moving and life events and the chaos that has happened. So I haven't spoken to her in quite some time, but before we had parted ways the most recent time, there was a dialogue on when your nervous system begins regulating, and you're not in this constant survival mode any longer, what you're capable of doing and processing greatly decreases for a couple years. And I think that that's also, again, like becoming 25 and setting out on my own and realizing that I am in a different place with a need for more like security and identity and all these things as an adult woman that a lot of people I'm surrounded by, and also just being tired and like not necessarily wanting to be pushing myself as much as I used to. And wanting to actually allow myself some of that grace and some of that peace. It actually has me thinking like a huge thing. I don't know if you know, I have a YouTube channel, Cloud Productions, and on that I have a video diary of my life, the Divine Diaries, which I've actually been filming my whole life, but the last year and this year currently seasons that are aired. And a huge reason for that show for me is living by example, that you can have autonomy over your life and you can choose to create something really beautiful, and also be like really vulnerable about the process of like healing and being neurodivergent and being a woman and being independent and just all of these things, being an artist, and really like what that's like. But anyway, in that living by example, I had realized that like I had always been really transparent about connections that I grew up with and things that I had encountered and endured, because I again, those relationships didn't respect me and didn't earn my respect. So I felt no need to protect them or preserve them. And so I had no qualms with like saying what had happened, because to me it was much more paramount to validate others' emotional experience and show them that they could still heal and still, again, gain autonomy and all of that. So, one thing I learned actually from my best friend in learning by example is that sometimes that's quiet and sometimes that's personal. And when I had opened up to having friendships and relationships and thinking about like actually building a family someday that I had never been able to experience, those are things that I would actually want to protect. And I had never had anything worth protecting before. So all of this sort of accumulate, what are words? I don't speak them for a living. Jeez. It really settled in this coming into my own as a young woman, and realizing that I was just really fucking neurodivergent. And another thing that this therapist had brought up was, because I had so many traumatic experiences and PTSD and things like that, my brain was so preoccupied with that survival state that I just kind of like made lists and coped. And please don't take that and run with it, because neurodivergence is so complex and we really need to be properly accommodating people. And that's not something that you can just like make a list and suck it up. Like certain people need medications for their brain chemistry. Certain people need different structures, and it's very to each their own. But I just didn't allow my brain to be itself. I was quite literally just like going through the motions of life and checking the boxes. So when I was healing, I realized that my brain is so much more weird and unique and different than, the societal neurotypical cis male structure that we've developed here. And I experienced so much more challenge with burnout and spoon theory and executive functioning and hyperfixation and special interests, and also being very blunt and honest, which has been a challenge with the PTSD and experiences with narcissism, and also with these relationships where I, again, don't actually understand the social dynamic of like being self-sacrificing any longer. It was something that I was for a really long time, and it just doesn't logically make sense for me. Ironically enough, they were really transactional relationships to begin with, but like on the other side of that, like there is no transaction, there is no like I don't know, place to live, one-off fun experience, a meal, anything that's really like worth putting yourself through your fucking soul on the chopping block. I don't know. In the album that I'm currently producing, there is this one line in the last song, actually. The chorus says, "Settle for the ghost of me. That's what you choose. Laughed at hurtful lies. So offended by the truth." And yeah, I think that like that is something that a lot of people, when they like have very limiting beliefs or falsified structure or a very constructed, charismatic character persona that is untrue to their identity or their like actions upon people, they have a real difficulty with the the bluntness of neurodivergence. And also, one thing that I've really been spinning around in my head for a while was my diagnosis with ADHD. I was pretty young and in like peak trauma and PTSD, and a lot of mental abuse that was not actually being recognized for what was really happening. And so with all of that, I wonder of the entire accuracy of my diagnosis, because self-diagnosis are valid, but if you are in the neurodivergent TikTok or whatever, why those things are kind of universally relatable is because our brains are on a spectrum. There's not a perfect neurotypical and neurodiverse brain. And I've mentioned this before, but when things become an actual diagnosis, it's when your symptomatic experience of it impacts your ability to function in the structures that be in this neurotypical world. So, it is valid to, be questioning and to self-diagnose and to explore yourself, but also like if it's pushing that line, like actually getting a professional opinion and a diagnosis that allows for accommodation is super important. But I ramble all of this to say I'm wondering now, as I'm older and I'm seeing my brain and my personality outside of just trauma, really for the first time, if I'm ADHD and not just ADHD, because, ooh, girl, let me tell you. 13 is actually just little facts here. One, we've lost half the world's biodiversity in just the last 40 years. And in the realm of sustainability physics, if something can't continue, it won't. That's a law that our universe abides by. Just thought I'd throw that out there. And a fun little quote that makes it a little bit better, I guess, is don't work harder or smarter, work darker. Use your knowledge of black magic to call upon the old gods. Turn CEOs into newts and ferns. Cover office buildings in moss and wildflowers and let raccoons have them. You deserve rest. Yeah, that was one of my favorite playful quotes from the internet that I thought I'd throw on that point. Anyway, number 14. This builds on some of the energetic truths we were talking. Love that I made that 2 words. Energetic truths we were talking about before. But life is truly about how you feel. Our feelings are our emotional guidance system, and you can truly pick up on what other people are thinking and feeling. It's a whole other TED Talk. But more importantly, you can find what resonates with you and what doesn't. I was talking about finding where you fall in all of these infinite spectrums of things that we identify with. And what is for you will be so incredibly undeniable. I also wrote down this quote: never give up on something you can't go a day without thinking about, because it's speaking to your soul for a reason, my guy. I don't know what to tell you. Also, have the courage to lose yourself in something that you truly want, and make yourself proud of the way that you love, boldly, consumingly, irrevocably. We can be convinced into papers and deadlines all the livelong day, but it really is about each moment that you're experiencing and how you choose to do so and how it makes you feel. Your children aren't going to ask you how Sally in high school thought about your grasp on mathematics, and the oldest version of you is not going to give a shit about how you filed your taxes last year. But your best friend may care about your silly little coffee and how it brightened your day. On this note, I've also just really started to lean into my intuition and trust that, like, that internal guidance system, there is a knowing. There is a knowing greater than our logic and mindset. And again, this is coming from somebody who has over-explained themselves, who has their hyperfixation in consciousness and trying to explain that with physics and psychology and philosophy and all of these things, because I felt like I needed a way to ground and explain all of these feelings to people, because again, with my trauma, with my upbringing, there was a lot of gaslighting and misinterpretation of intentionality or of identity. So being able to like articulate these things is kind of my niche, but also falling back into that, where it came from was that feeling, that knowing, that trust in your intuition. 15 was, again, just something realized about myself more than just like learned about life. But my ability to learn and live like this was not something that like my past would have supported or was ever possible for me in a past reality. And that just to sit back and realize how far I've come, or that like actually be proud of myself, that I am personally and single-handedly responsible for the beautiful life that I've created. That I'm someone my younger self would not only have felt safe with, but would have thought was totally cool. And that's honestly, that's the only person I'm trying to make proud anymore. And I added this little quote, my favorite conspiracy theory is that everything will turn out okay eventually. 16, another short and sweet one. I'm really not even going to explain unless you want me to write a whole freaking dissertation about it, because I will. But music is the language of the soul. Actually, speaking of writing a whole dissertation about it, if you do listen to the first episode, which if you do, I'm so sorry because it's so chaotic and I'm not that great with reading things, even if I write them. And I don't even know how to pronounce half the words that I write because they're big sciencey words. But in that, in the theory of the superconscious, I do talk about the theory of music a little bit. So there's that. But 16, music is the language of the soul. 17, I learned what it feels like to feel at home in someone's energy. I was fortunate enough to have a best friend of over 11 years now that taught me what unconditional love looks and feels like, and validated emotions and acceptance, what all that feels like. But I've only recently found like a homecoming in an energy that I feel so at peace, so known, and so excited, for lack of a better term, in someone's presence, in like this way that's impossible to articulate. I just keep thinking about how like other languages have like a million words for one word that we have, and I think the one that frustrates me most is love, because there's just infinite ways that we experience love and identify love, and I think I feel it for so much of life, but they're so different, and to pinpoint exactly what you're talking about requires so many more adjectives than there even are. But it made me think of that like TikTok audio of like the Egyptians believed the most significant thing you could do in your life was die. Oh god. Okay, anyway. I feel like I can get very incredibly in my head, and in protecting myself from all of the energies that I've endured and continue to endure just maneuvering life. But I found this presence that makes me feel like I can like open up and be true and explore and express. And I don't know, like it makes me think about when I was really young. I used to actually like be a performer. Like I've been trained my whole life, but I haven't performed in like over a decade. And even though it feels like home, it feels like homecoming. So rarely are there those energies that make you feel safe. And I think actually cultivating that, like acceptance and value and validation, allows you to find that energy and tap in it more in yourself, so that you carry it and you can bring it to a show no matter what the audience is like. And to actually find an energy that feels safe to settle in for the first time, and again like explore my own identity or mentality or emotions or sexuality or whatever, and figure out more of who I am and become more comfortable and confident in expressing that and evolving on that and building on that, and to be able to think of people's energy and my energy and how that entangles and how that grounds, and being able to tap into that in a circumstance where it's not present, and utilize that peace and that security is just, that's life altering. Jesus, I can't speak. So many feelings. Okay, 18. Meditation and water make a world of difference. And I know, shut up. I know it's obnoxious as fuck to hear when you're experiencing so many things and you're like, oh no, like this body pain is this much more, this emotional experience is so much more than this. But I'm talking like the amount of things, emotional, physical, mental, physical toxins that my body has transmuted. And I tell you, sleep, water, and meditation. I know, girl, like I said, I'm hella neurodivergent. Like, I make every excuse in the motherfucking book to, wow, I'm just swearing in every episode now. Okay, cool. To not meditate. I haven't in a while, probably a couple weeks, but it makes such a big difference. Like, I know it's like the most obnoxious thing in the world. Like, it's a trend online of those boyfriends that are like, oh, you have a headache? How much water have you had today? But I shit you not, there's been several nights just this week where I'm like, oh, I have a headache. Let me drink like a whole bottle of water. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And this is coming from somebody who used to be super hydrated. Like, I remember in high school, I had a teacher that was like, nobody drinks the water that they should. And my friend was like, Morgan does. And he was like, absolutely not. You know, that's like 2 gallons, right? And they were like, listen, Morgan does. And I used to be so good about it. And again, like, I think that was because that was that healing time of my life where that was really, like, again, my identity and everything I was doing. And it really helped me purge out so many of the things that my body was processing, and helping, like, actually eating clean and having my body run as smoothly as possible really helped process all of those like much deeper things. But now I'm taking on so much more responsibility, and with the hyperfixation, I can like forget that I'm a human with a body that needs to go eat, drink, sleep, and use the restroom. So actually take care of your basic needs. Especially if you're, you know, asking for other people to give a shit about them. 19. It is your darkness that makes you light. It is your capacity to transmute pain, to see the shades in others, and what inspires you to show up better that makes you remarkable. And this is not to say that, I know there's a big phrase of like, light can't shine without the darkness, or like, this is not to say that there needs to be pain for you to be kind or soft or to show up in a great manner. It's just to say that it's not without contrast that we understand what's possible. Again, with those polarities, if we didn't experience the exact opposite, it would be really hard to even conceptualize just how great certain things could be. And moving forward, you forever have that that imprint of what that was like. And so it never has to be that dark or that hard or that painful again. But definitely grateful to have known that, and to know that its polarity exists as well. Just as profound light and love and experience. This also circles back to sensory sensitivity with neurodivergence, that like it blows my mind that neurotypicals have like a duller experience of the world. I think that that's honestly one of my greatest gifts, that like as much as certain things can be so overstimulating or so overwhelming, I was joking with a friend just the other day that like when you can hear the electricity in the walls, you get very selective about what you pay attention to. And I remember when I was younger, my dad was like frustrated that I would never know where he parked the car, and I'm like, I'm not going to it without you, so like I need to be selective about what I'm paying attention to, which really gets into that whole trend online and that whole culture of like when somebody's safe enough to turn your brain off with. And it's so true, because like when you're so hyper aware of every like minute expression of every individual and the energies that even fucking like inanimate objects are letting out, then it gets overstimulating. But it's also the other side of that, to experience the great things in life just so viscerally and so saturated, is unlike anything else. And I don't think I would have traded that to have things be less difficult. Yeah, I think how profound things can be are worth the contrast of it. Number 20, know when and where to take yourself seriously. I think it's paramount that you show up for yourself, that you take care of yourself, that you take aligned action towards your goals. But literally everything else is just for fun. And I think, again, being surrounded by so many young people or being relatively active online, I think people are so in their heads or so debilitated by their fears, and that's something I've experienced as well. But I think that sometimes when people actually do like perceive you in a fleeting moment, they completely miss that sometimes you're just, or for me, the majority of time, you're just being absolutely absurd and having fun. But I mean, that's their journey. If they choose to see people or not. But yeah, I think that for your own sanity and peace and joy in this life, knowing when to take things extraordinarily seriously and when to just fuck it, man. I don't know. 21, I think this is very self-evident if you follow me at all, but film, photography, and journal. Again, with like meditation, journaling, I have like an ongoing note in my documents of all of these like little quotes and beautiful things I've experienced, little foods that I had, and the comments that people made that made me really happy, and the planetary transits and the little signs and synchronicities that are happening, and the things that people say and how they make me feel, and all of this, and what frustrates me and what excites me. But actually, like, putting it down in the story, I have to like make time for that. But doing these things, and I have the video diary, and I film every day, and I have a real passion for film and photography. They allow you to be clear on your narrative, the narrative of your life, your mental narrative, the life that you're leading. You document your memories, which is so important. You get to romanticize your life. A huge thing when I made the first season publicly that I did, you hold yourself accountable for how you're spending your time. And in that, it made me realize when I was being too hard on myself, when I really needed to push myself and have discipline, when I didn't like the circumstances I was in and I wanted to flesh out all of the options of changing them. And yeah, just truly like how I was spending my time on a day-to-day basis. It also obviously processing your feelings, and finally you become aware of your perspective. This is a little bit different than like the narrative that you have in my first point here, but yeah, truly your outlook and your framework for like the beliefs that are the pillars of your mental truth. I mean, this becomes exactly why our lives mirror our belief system and our our own personal bias of, we enforce what we believe to be true. We make them self-evident by perpetuating those. So what exactly are you saying to yourself? And then challenge two things. Is it founded and is it desired? 22, another short, simple, sweet, but communication and accountability are simply respect. 23, a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of us, but earning things feels like redemption to the ego because the harder things are to obtain, we equate achieving them to our value or self-worth. But a healed love or opportunity are truly easy and soft. They do not ask you to be more than you are because you are inherently worthy. Those things that do aren't love, they are performance, and your nervous system is addicted to that chaos. 24, one more short, sweet one. I don't want anything that doesn't choose me. I also just want people who I can unmask around and co-regulate with. Finally, number 25, the divine feminine within all of us is our connection to the void. It is feminine energy that transcends dimension from thought to a tangible asset. Be conscious of the feminine attention that you garner and where you direct yours. That last one can and probably will be an episode entirely of its own. Honestly, most of these bullet points probably will. But thank you for spending your time here with me today. This is a long episode, like a whole hour. But yeah, I think these lessons have brought me so much peace and, like I said, autonomy over my life, and so much validation and agency and identity and just anything that you could ask for out of a really fulfilled life when I really began to understand these truths, but yeah, I'm so grateful that you spent your time here with me today, and I really hope that this helped you in any way, be introspective or take some change or accountability in your life, or just food for thought. And I'll see you guys here next week. Thank you so much. Bye.